is so mom. Whether you are driving in your car on the way to work or just settling in with your second cup of coffee, this is your chance to not have to do anything because you can just listen to mom and me talk
Natter away.
as we've been doing for 50 years.
Yes.
How are you, mom?
I am well, Adele. How are you?
I'm great. I'm happy not to be in the midst of a blizzard.
Oh my gosh. Listening to your brother talk about shoveling and all the snow and the trees that are down and the power. I decided not to complain about the rain on that thread.
Oh, well, often we just use that thread to complain. So why not?
Well, I don't think it would
The family
appreciate.
thread?
Yeah.
I love the pictures, though. I love all the pictures of Central Park. I have a little bit of FOMO for the blizzard, but like 90%, I'm good.
I told my sister because she was so worried and the snow was coming down so hard and she lives alone and she kept talking about the trees that were falling and I thought, she was just catastrophizing what turned out to be a pretty horrible storm, but I told her she did not have to chop wood for the fire, that
Yeah,
she
that
could
was lucky.
actually stay in
She
her
could just
house.
watch it.
Yeah,
And meanwhile,
could
we went
watch
to
it.
a play.
And you and I went to see The Six,
I
which
didn't how did you I didn't even really recap with you because we were tired because we were out past our bedtime, then we just went
at
home.
9. The play was over at 9.
It should be called the 9. Um, I liked it, though. It was fun.
It was really fun, and had to I had to suppress all the horrible things I know about King Henry VIII's wives because you didn't wanna hear
You didn't
about it.
suppress it, you were muttering about it up the aisle.
But I wanted you to be interested in all the dark facts I had
I
about
had a
those
few
wives.
myself, I was keeping them in my inside
You could have
voice.
told me. I would have loved them.
Oh, he gave Anne of Cleves a horrible, horrible time when she was there. That was not an accurate well, first of all, they were all in glitter boots, so none of it was accurate. It was very fun.
You don't know that.
Apparently, I think, so I'll probably get it in the comments if this is not true, but Anne of Cleves, he saw the portrait. He wanted her to come from Germany. She spent she spent like 2 years she spent 2 years learning the dances, learning, all of the court intrigue things that she needed, and then he really disliked her, so he started this active PR campaign to get her loathed. And it wasn't about how fun it was to be there because she did get divorced, but after just being put through hell. That
I
was my little
I did not know that. I did not know that. Who was the 2nd queen that was beheaded? Was that
Anne
that was
Boleyn.
no, no.
Oh,
She was
Catherine
Catherine of Aragon?
Parr or Howard? One died in
Howard.
childbirth and one
It
was
was Catherine Howard, and do you know what her last words were?
God damn it.
I'm
No.
gonna tell you.
Okay, because you were there.
"I die as the Queen of England, but I would rather die as the wife of Thomas Culpeper."
Oh.
And that was such a clever thing to say because the next day they
Oh,
hanged, drawn,
no.
and quartered Thomas Culpeper. I got it in.
We're cutting all of this.
No.
This is crazy.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about our guest.
Yes, let's talk about our guest. We're so excited. We have a wonderful guest today.
We do. We are really excited to invite Michael Kong here. I we had to twist his arm a little bit, but he has such a great story, and I love the little bits I know of it, and then I've heard a little bit more before the podcast. So Michael is an amazing man, so many interests, so many things that he has done. He's an entrepreneur at heart, but he and his wife basically bootstrapped a tiny Chicago magazine in 1993 with no money, no training, eventually building it into one of the largest city regional magazine groups in the country. And he is very candid about losing nearly everything after 9/11, which just made my heart sink thinking about it with 3 babies under 2 and a mortgage, and what it means to take risks with your family watching. So we want to hear more about that. Um, ahead of this conversation, Michael reached out and shared something that I was just amazed. I loved hearing it. His father is Chinese, his mother is half Irish and half Czech, and when they married in 1960, there were 20 states in this country where interracial marriage was illegal, states where they legally couldn't live. And they navigated that resistance from family and community and simply to be together. And I think that story lives very deeply within him. Um, the other part of it, and we are going to learn more about that. But he is also one of four boys, but now through marriage and family, he describes their gatherings as looking like an old Benetton ad. Norwegian, Mexican, Jewish, Indian, lesbian, a very, very American story. And the part that I love most, because I happen to know these three women, is that he is a girl dad. And we'd like to start with hearing about your story, introducing Michael Kong to the audience, and then hearing about your basically your OG story.
Yes,
Like my
welcome.
OG family story,
Welcome to
like,
the
or
podcast. What's that?
thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Good to have you.
Good to have you.
What do you want to talk about first? Like my sort of
Your
old family history, or
your old family history. It's fascinating.
oh, thanks, yeah. I mean, our immigrant story is like really any immigrant story, except for the fact that my parents did have an interracial marriage, which was complicated in the '60s. But my father's Chinese, and his family, his mother's family, um, was that was to be my great great grandfather on my father's mother's side, came over from China, or were sort of brought over from China in the 1860s, with this millions of Chinese coolies, who worked on the railroads and in the gold mines in the Old West. It's a total California Old West story. And it was a very, very hard life, very rough and tumble life. My great, my original Chinese ancestor, my great great grandfather, actually spoke English, because even though he was like a peasant from the middle of Toisan province in southern China, because he was randomly educated by a Jesuit missionary who was tramping around in China in the 1850s, and he and his cousin spoke English, because they were educated by this missionary. So when he came to work on the railroads in California, he was a translator between the Irish, basically in California, who ran everything. That's the other side of my family, and all these millions of Chinese who didn't speak English, and so he was a translator, and he became a foreman, and he had his own little crew. But he was sort of invaluable in that regard, because there were very few bilingual English Chinese people working the railroad. So because and this is kind of an anomaly in American immigration history, but the Chinese did not come over to come to America. They came over to work, and they wanted to go home. And half of them actually did go home. Like, it's a real anomaly in American immigration history that half of these immigrants went back to China. But because they came over just to work, they came over just as men. There were no Chinese women with them. So my great great grandfather, there was an awful trade of women, right? Being brought over from China for Chinese men. And my grandfather basically bought my great great grandmother off a stage, right? Because, to have a wife. And they got married, and they had 12 children. And
So
the,
things turned out pretty
they
well.
turned out fine. I mean, as far as I can tell. And then their second oldest was my great grandfather, and he was a very interesting character. He grew up in sort of prohibition Chinatown in San Diego, and was a proper gangster. It was him. It was the Chinese gangs versus the Irish gangs for control of illegal, booze and gambling and prostitution and drugs and extortion. Um, but he had a very interesting life. And then he had one,
Can I
yeah.
interrupt? What is a proper gangster?
All the right, high paying sectors.
Okay.
I have this great old photo of him, where he's sitting in a really ornate carved like Chinese chair, and he's wearing like an Al Capone suit with like a fedora and a big stogie. Okay,
Right.
and behind him are these Tong gang members. The Chinese gangs were called Tongs, right? And they're wearing these kind of, it was a black and white photo, but they're wearing these like ornate silk robes, and their arms are crossed like this, and each one of them's carrying a hatchet. They were called the Hatchet Men. And back in the day, if they were going to kill somebody, the Chinese way to do it was they'd leave a hatchet in the back of your head, with a special tassel on it to let you know who it came from.
I really want to see this photo.
I have this
Is
photo.
it from, like, 1890?
Yeah, it's like
Um,
no, yeah, it's from no, that was from like
10
1920.
to 1920.
Yeah,
Oh,
1920,
I'd like to
1930.
Yeah,
see
the
that
golden age
Okay,
photo.
of
I'll find that.
gangsters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so he had one daughter, my grandmother, whom I knew. She was, I think she was about, I was about 10 when she passed away. And then, and she was an only child. And she had my father, who was an only child. But then on the other side of that family, as we were discussing earlier, his father's side, they came from China, but much later and through Honolulu. And my grandfather was born there. And then through some strange coincidence, when he was 16 years old, he got this scholarship at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, which is why so many of my family members since then have gone have gone to Dartmouth. But yeah, so and then my mother's family, my mom's half Irish and half Czech, and they're from upstate New York, working class Irish Catholic, community up there. They all worked in this one big brick factory up in Rockland County, across the river from West Point. They like to say that they made the bricks that built New York City in the 20th century. And my mom went to nursing school, and my dad, after college, went to med school at Cornell in New York City, and they met at the old St. Vincent's Hospital in the East Village, which is now closed, and they fell in love. Yeah, in the 50s, when an interracial thing was just, it just really wasn't allowed. Honestly, I mean, it was, as you say, illegal at that time in 20 states until 1967. But even amongst their close friends, they were like, "Don't do it. It's not gonna be a good idea. Your kids won't be white. They won't be Asian." The family's disaster, right? The Chinese side of the family was more upset than the white side.
Yeah.
Nobody came to the wedding. My father's parents formally disowned him, like at the courthouse. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they were upset. Um, but then my older brother Tommy was born, and you know how all babies kind of look Chinese, particularly ones that are partly Chinese. So, my father, after my brother was like a year old, sent his parents a photo. They're like, "Oh, our grandson," and by the time I can remember anything, like in the 70s, everything was fine. I mean, it was all the 70s was a great period, but everything was fine. Everybody was all. I mean, I was very close with my grandparents. They were close with my mother. The other side was all fine. It was great, but it was not easy
Yeah.
for them at that time. I never really suffered any, like discrimination in the way that, you know, other cultures suffered harder racial discrimination in this country, but it was there for sure. It was a little odd to be biracial as a kid. And now, so my eldest brother's married to a Norwegian girl. I'm married to Stacy, who's mixed white European. One brother's married to a 100% Mexican girl. Last name is Chavez. My brother Steve's married to a nice Jewish girl named Rebecca Epstein.
There's all this story that's just so much that they have to deal with, thinking of your parents. And then as the child of that union, you think, I guess that's how much they loved each other, to sort of have that embedded discord. I mean, just being disowned on the steps of the courthouses is just wild, but I don't know, to be the child of that, knowing all of the complication, there is something that I would just feel so so wanted.
Well, I know it's kind of a cliche to say, but it did used to be harder. I mean, it's like, I mean, like when my grandfather was the one who was from Hawaii, the Chinese one, when he was 16, he'd never been off the island of Hawaii, right? And he gets this scholarship to go to Dartmouth in the 20s. And he was basically educated by his older sister, didn't have great formal education, although he was smart. But she put him on a steamer from Honolulu to LA, however long that took, little suitcase. I don't think he, I mean, I have one great photo of him when he was like a lifeguard on the on the beach, and he's wearing like this one piece bathing suit that men used to wear, right? Savage tan, amazingly tan. Uh, and she bought him like a little seersucker suit and a straw hat and put him on a boat to LA, and then a really long train all the way across the country to Boston,
Wind up in
and then another train up to New Hampshire to a school that had maybe 200 students, all men at the time, obviously all white.
Sure.
I think he was kind of like a social experiment, to be honest with you, because there was one Native American student, one Chinese student, one Jewish student at the time. There were my grandfather was tight with him because that he wasn't getting into any other fraternities or anything.
That must
It
have
was
been
harder then.
really hard for him. I mean, think about going off to something you have no idea where you're going, what it is, and then to have basically that type of just being ostracized,
I
essentially.
mean, he used to recall it or speak fondly of his time at Dartmouth. And he was a very good student. He graduated Phi Beta Kappa, and then he went and got his master's in education at Columbia in New York. But you're right. I mean, he was on his own. You have to figure it out yourself back then,
Yeah.
you know?
And also where he was just in Honolulu, right? He was in where was he?
Yeah, it was in Honolulu. It
In
was
Honolulu.
nowhere,
So he grew up this one way and then it suddenly
like way before it was a state, right? I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
just so strange.
It's an
I know.
incredible story.
It is.
I'm more, when I think about my parents though getting married in 1960. I mean, I'm not that old. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it's crazy to think that, like when I was born, there were 20 states where you literally were not allowed to live because interracial marriage was illegal in those states.
Well, I grew up in that era,
Yeah,
and I can remember knowing the first biracial friends I had, and we were living in North Carolina, and it
yeah,
was very hard for them.
yeah,
I think, they could live there, but they were always worried.
yeah.
Times have changed,
Times have changed.
which is good. Well, let's pivot to your marriage and then also how you and Stacy started your business because I love that
Yeah.
story.
Well,
Makes me nervous when I hear it.
well, we met at graduate school at the University of Chicago. She went to Michigan. She's from Michigan. And I was there studying American literature. I got a master's in American literature in '89. And then I did 4 years of PhD coursework and passed my oral exams, but did not write the dissertation. I went to work in publishing. But the idea was to be an English professor, right? That's what you get that degree for. And Stacy got her master's in anthropology and film, and then worked for PBS for a while and made documentaries, and that was her training. So we met. We were actually set up. We didn't know each other there, but we were set up at school by a mutual friend. And do you want me to tell that story?
Yes, I love a
Yeah.
good bring back the old-fashioned setup because everybody
Okay.
meets everybody on
All
the
right.
apps now.
So yeah, right. So as I tell my girls, like back then, when somebody set you up on a blind date, you had no idea what you were what you were getting into. But we were set up by a mutual friend, and I went down I took her out for dinner, and she opened the door, and I was quite struck by it. She was not, but I was quite struck by it. And we went on a bunch of dates, and I had to overcome two hurdles with her. The first was that when her friend proposed the idea to her, she said, "What's his last name?" And our friend Sue said, "Kong." And she goes, "How tall is he?" Because she's quite tall, and most Asians are not that tall. And she had just gotten back from this 3-month trip in Asia, which she calls the Sea of Heads, because she was so much taller than everybody. And so, and so our friend Sue said, "He's tall enough. He's like 6 feet. He's taller than you are. He's tall enough." And then we went out, and we went out on a whole bunch of dates, and I was trying to play it cool and be, you know, I was like, "This is a serious one. I'm not gonna screw this one up." And so I found this out many years later. She would report back to our friends, "Okay, first of all, he's not making any moves on me whatsoever, and I'm pretty sure it's because he's gay. He's definitely gay. You guys know he's gay, right?" And my friend was like, "He's not gay. No, I don't think he is." So he's like, "He's definitely gay." And I found, and there were a few telltale signs apparently that tipped her off the fact that made her think I was gay. But one was that she came over to my apartment once with for the first time with a friend of hers, uh, sort of more conservative woman from Texas, good friend of ours, and we had a glass of wine in the apartment. Then we went out to dinner, and the next day, her friend Adrian said, "Stacy, I got to tell you something. He's either been married before and hasn't told you, which is a big problem, or he's gay, because no straight 27-year-old has that much crystal stemware." Okay. And it's true. I had a lot of Waterford wine glasses. Okay. And this is because my mother, my beloved mother, when she moved me into my apartment in Chicago several years earlier, she said, you have to have something nice to serve young ladies with." So she bought me a starter set of like Waterford crystal, Lismore, the Lismore pattern, Waterford crystal. And I had like a couple red wine glasses, some white wine glasses, and then every year for my birthday or Christmas, she would buy me more and more. So by the time I met Stacy, I had quite a lot of it. Okay, and it was all in a little glass like curio cabinet. So anyway, so she was convinced for that reason that perhaps I was gay. But at any rate, I overcame that eventually, and we dated for a couple of years. But during we weren't married at the time that we started the magazine, but she worked for Hill and Knowlton's PR agency and was making documentaries for PBS in Chicago, and I had decided to not pursue my PhD, finish my PhD at Chicago, and I was working for the Chicago Sun Times in the old newspaper days, which was sort of interesting. And we just decided I'd been there for a year and a half, and I kind of understood how to make a newspaper. Um, and we just decided, let's just own something and try something on our own. And it was a true bootstrap. Like we really didn't. I mean, I knew how to make the magazine, and we had like a graphic designer who was a friend of ours, and I sold all the ads in the first issue of my little newspaper was 16 pages. 16 pages, black and white, no stitch, no trims, just a folded newspaper. And we covered basically the philanthropic scene in Chicago, like the sort of upscale fundraiser, black type fundraiser kind of thing. And I knew we could do it, and so I went out and sold $7,000 worth of advertising because I knew it was going to cost me $6,000 to print the magazine. And Stacy gave me the $6,000 because I didn't have any money. Um, and we put out the first issue of the magazine, and she and I wrote most of it. I sold all the ads in it. We, you know, it's amazing how, as one of your former guests was saying, I don't think you would, I don't think would have done that if I had known more, because there's so many things you didn't know that are scary that would have dissuaded you from doing it. But we published the first issue. I remember when it was on press, so we printed 50,000 copies of it. And I remember we were sitting around thinking, how, like, how much volume of space is that? Like, how big is 50,000 copies of the magazine? So we have to deliver it. Okay. And is it like one pallet or is it like 50 pallets? Like, we didn't have any idea. I was just kind of trying to figure it out. Turned out to be basically two truckloads, right? And yeah, and we printed the magazine. We rented a U-Haul on the first day that we distributed the first issue. Stacy drove it all around Chicago. I was delivering bundles out the back of the U-Haul all night long.
What was it called?
It's called Chicago Social. It was about like the social scene.
Yeah, yeah.
It still goes. 33 years old.
Oh, it still goes.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, it
That is
still
so
goes.
cool.
Yeah,
So help me to understand. Stacy's driving a U-Haul.
yeah.
You're in the back with bundles. You're dropping these bundles at like newsstands?
Some at newsstands,
Or
but
you're going
basically,
Individually to
no, no, it was basically free distribution to high rises in like the Gold Coast Lincoln Park part of Chicago. So you would give the doorman 50 and he would just put it in everyone's mailbox kind of thing.
got it.
Yeah. It was free circulation.
Wow.
Yeah. And it took us 6 months, to put out the first issue. And then after that first issue was out, I was like, oh my God, thank God. And the next day I woke up, I was like, the second issue is due on press in like 15 days. And then you're just in it, you know, making it
So
happen.
how long were you doing that?
So we published just that one magazine. My brother Steve joined after the sixth issue, and he was my in office partner for 20 years, right? And we did that for 5 years, and then I moved out. We moved out here, and I launched Angelino magazine in '99, and then I opened a magazine in 2001 in Orange County called Riviera, and then I bought San Francisco magazine, and then I took a private equity partner and got serious about how to finance and model up a roll up. And then we opened 35 more magazines and then sold them in 2007.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that happened in between, but I was the CEO there for 17 years, and then, you know, but it continues. I mean, I think Modern Luxury publishes 65 magazines now or something.
And that was your company.
It's my company. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about 9/11.
Oh my God. So, uh, sometimes, Stacy used to say that I have like two speeds, right? Greed and fear, which is 100% accurate. I was either so excited and so ambitious about how fast we were growing and how much money, more money we were going to make, how much market share we were taking, and so on. And then, depending on what would happen on a given day, I would just be in full fear mode, like, oh my God, this is going to fail. There, someone's going to leave, whatever. But 9/11 was a whole different thing, and sometimes when partly because of what 9/11 was and what it meant to the business, but also because at like a certain point in your life, in your early 30s, you just have so much going on, and it's just all happening at the same time. When I look back on it, sometimes I don't know how I survived. I don't know how we survived it, but in a short period of time, in Phoebe was born. I launched Angelino in the fall of '99. Phoebe was born in April of '99. My father had just died. He died 4 days before she was born in the same hospital in Chicago. Oh my God, it was a lot. Stacy got 1 day to recover, and then 2 days after Phoebe was born, we flew to LA with our brand new baby and my father for his funeral, but also because I was so far behind in getting in launching our second magazine. 15 people coming to work the next week. The office wasn't ready. It was just a lot. But we got the magazine published, and it was a success. And for a couple months, 6 months, it was going well. And then one day, Stacy calls me up, and she's like, "Hey, you want to have lunch today?" And I said, "I don't think I've ever had lunch with you during the work week. Literally, we're too busy." She said, "Chris, let's have lunch." So we met at Jones on Third for lunch, which was close to my office. And I was super busy. And she's like, "I'm pregnant again, and we're going to have twins this time." Okay. Phoebe was 6 months old, right? So 8 months old, maybe. So I was like, oh my God, okay, I have to get real now. We were living in a little sublet apartment in Venice. I've got to buy a house, which I can't afford. Got to get a mortgage. There's going to be two more babies. I'm going to have three kids under two, right? And so we got that house, and we're just barely skating by. And then everybody remembers where they were on 9/11. And I woke up. Stacy woke me up. It's 5 in the morning. She said, "You need to see what's on the TV." And the twin towers were falling down. And so maybe I had 50 employees at that time. I called both offices, like, no one is going to come into work today or tomorrow, and then over the weekend, and we'll just see how this whole thing shakes out. I mean, we just all watched it unfold. So the Sunday after 9/11, I went into the office, and I was like, I'm just going to have to get my head together for what I'm going to say to the staff and what's going to happen. And this is back when, everybody had fax machines, okay? So I had a fax machine. I had my own personal fax machine in my office. So I walk into the office, okay, and I look at the fax machine, and there's a stack of paper in like the in tray on the fax machine. And I looked at it, and I knew immediately what it was. It was all contract cancellations, just
Oh,
cancellation from all my clients.
brutal.
I had a couple hundred big advertisers. It's
Yeah.
pretty well diversified, but everybody was like Absolute Vodka, Chanel, Mercedes-Benz, Bergdorf Goodman, just cancel, 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 cancel. Okay. And I just took a knee. I mean, I looked at it and I knew what it was. And some of them, my clients were friends of mine, and there was some had a little cover letter with it, like, listen, we don't know what's going to happen. It's not just you. We're stopping everything everywhere. National magazines, New York Times, everything until we see how this plays out. But for now, all our fall advertising is canceled. Just cancel it all. Okay. And I just was looking at this huge stack of cancellations. And then I realized that the fax machine was out of paper. Okay.
No more
So
Oh,
I got
cancellations.
some more paper and I put
oh,
it in. And with my trembling finger, I hit the
yeah,
OK button,
yeah.
and they just kept coming. More
Oh,
cancellations, more cancellations,
oh,
right? And I, my response to that, if you want to know the truth, was a meltdown that Woody Allen would have been proud of. Okay. I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is it. Of course, you can't run your own magazine company. You don't have any backers, you don't have a bank, you know, behind you, don't have any private equity investors, you're gonna live on the street. I mean, I had 3 babies, you know, Stacy and I had 3 babies, a house we couldn't really afford, 50 employees, everything's going down the toilet, no backup plan, no safety net, right? I we couldn't even turn to my father, he had just passed away, right? There was nothing, and the lucky thing about that versus, say, 2009 is that it was actually sort of short-lived, right? I mean, we lost a lot of money for 2 months, but then clients were sort of kind of got their feet under them, and they do in our business, they did a lot of advertising in the fall and over the holidays, so they kinda came back, and we eked it out. But there was it's like I didn't know what I didn't know because something like that had never happened, you know? Makes me breathe heavy right now just to think about it.
Yeah.
But it's not like I figured that out, I just got lucky on that one, and things just kind of turned around a little bit, you know?
But I think those are 2 2 milestones that most of us remember. Well, you were living in the middle of the blast. I mean, Adele was downtown.
Oh, you were? Yeah.
Yeah, but, I always think that what was so strange about that is if we were, down in Lower Tribeca, and, of course, I saw it, and what was very hard for me to reconcile was how much was happening, um, so many lives destroyed, so many lives impacted, and even though we were physically there, I didn't know anybody. I didn't I certainly saw the papers and I was there in some ways, but it's these stories that resonate for me because I feel like I experienced it only in this one way. I was siloed only to geography.
Yeah.
Do you know?
No.
Like my little brother, he knew so many Cantor Fitzgerald
Oh,
kids.
really?
Yeah.
And so in many ways, although he was, in Massachusetts or wherever he was, he had, a, much longer reach.
Yeah.
Um, so, but it happened to all of us, in terms of how we were all dealing with it. But that to me sometimes is the hard part for me is how I felt, I don't know, survivor's guilt, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand that. I had, I was head of a school in Pennsylvania, and of course, it's all before internet,
Mhm.
and every single upper school class was out on a field trip.
Oh.
And Adele called me, and I was out trying to raise money, and I drove back to school, and we didn't know. We put a little television in the hall. I didn't want anything where kids could see it, and
Mhm.
we watched it, but trying to get these classes and figure out
Like, even where the kids were.
where they were, how to get them back to campus. And the funny thing that I remember is that I was trying to keep everyone calm, trying to meet with kids who were coming back. We had parents who worked on Wall Street, so
Mhm.
we didn't know, if they were coming back to having lost their families. But as I was going through this day trying to keep everyone calm, I turned around at one point and one of our parents, who was an Episcopal minister, head of a big church, and one of our parents, who was a rabbi, just came in and walked with me.
Oh,
Didn't
that's nice.
didn't say anything, didn't do anything, but just walked with me. And it was, it was just that a day that I couldn't even reflect on
Mhm.
because everything, the immediacy of trying to take care of a community. Uh, and then when I got home, Philadelphia schools were closed for the next day, and I made the decision we were going to go back to school because I thought I don't want kids watching all this all day,
Oh, that's interesting.
and I wanted them to have a safe place.
Yeah,
So
and
I
to be
think
together maybe, yeah.
yeah, and so I think as adults, we were like zombies and terrified about the future of school. We didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
It was a scary time.
Did you find, though, that things sort of rebounded, not to normal areas, but it was there was this great darkness and a big downdraft, right? And then we kind of figured out like no other attacks happened in the country, and then airplanes started flying again, and things
Right.
normalized a little bit.
The funny thing is, kids were scared, but they didn't know what they were scared of.
Yeah.
Adults were sort of shell shocked. The art department created a project for kids, and it took up almost an entire wall of a huge hallway, and it was the American flag.
Oh,
And all the kids could bring it was like a collage, so there would be kids assigned to any pictures in blue, any pictures in red or
no.
white, and then they put this collage together, and so I think the more we kept them doing things, it was probably the most patriotic and unified the country had ever been
Yeah.
for that brief shining moment.
Yeah, I know. Where'd that go?
Yeah. That's the thing that I wish had stayed because we
Yeah.
were all feeling hugely patriotic and
Yeah.
protective and also protective of children in their
Yeah.
emotional lives.
Well, my company, within our company, 9/11 was a very specific, true black swan sort of event. But as your previous guest, Audrey, was saying on your last podcast, 2008, 9, 10, 11 was a much more challenging period. I learned a lot about like what kind of company we were going to be and what kind of CEO I was going to be because I was constantly under bank pressure to do things that I didn't want to do that really shouldn't have been done. Like at one point, the guy who was representing the banks was going through our expenses and whatever. And honestly, when you own your own company, there's very little fat in it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's not a lot of waste. So he was getting very frustrated with us because we really couldn't find any place to cut,
Right.
right? And so at one point I don't know why this is just occurring to me now, but he was going through our payroll, and there was a salesperson, advertising salesperson in the LA office, who was showing up with a salary, but like no sales. And he said, "What's up with her?" And I said, "Well, this is a salesperson who's out sick for a while. She has cancer. She's out sick for a while, and the other salespeople are handling her accounts, which is why it's not showing up as a zero for her. But she's on the payroll, and you know, she had a double mastectomy, and she was taking her chemo, and she was in a very rough spot. Everybody loved her. We were a tight company. All the other salespeople were handling her accounts and letting her be paid for them until she came back, and eventually she did come back. But the guy who I was technically reporting to at that time said, "You just got to fire her because obviously, if she's not here and other salespeople are handling it, we just need to cut her." I said, "I'm not gonna cut her. I just told you she has got breast cancer, and even if you wanna look at it just in dollars and cents, she's an asset to the company, and she will make us much more money than we're paying her. We just have to take care of her during this period of time, right?" And he said, "I'm telling you, you have to fire her," basically so he can go back and tell the banks, "Oh, look at the people I fired," or whatever, right? And it was just very hard to be constantly up against that. And of course, I didn't fire her. I said, You run the board, but I'm the executive that runs the company. So you can fire me and put in someone else who will fire her, but I'm not firing her." And also, I stopped taking my salary for 2 years, the last 2 years that I was there, because I had to lay off so many people, and I just gotten paid, for selling the other half of the company. And so they were like accruing my salary somewhere on the balance sheet. I said, here's what you'll do. You can take whatever she's costing us, 80 grand, whatever, just take it out of my accrual. Okay, so that solves your problem. But I was like, it was a hard, ugly experience of like, what it's really like to work with distressed banks and investors who are unhappy and in a really tough recession, But we did make it through. We didn't close down any magazines. We ended up buying our biggest competitor during that period, actually. And then once the debt was restructured and, I'd already sold my equity, it was time for me to go. There was just no purpose I was serving there.
It's a really interesting story, I think, about you'd think that, like, being, like, an empath is really counterintuitive to being a founder of a company, that you would yourself would have to exhibit all these traits of being, mercenary and cutthroat yourself, but in a way, what is so interesting is that you figured out this lovely way to figure out how to keep her, that is also what I think about when I really think about being, an entrepreneur, which are just unusual solutions,
Yeah.
and sort of finding a very different solve. It was really out of the box. But I think, you know, it sort of then does make sense in the wholeness of what it entails to kind of start your own business. So
No, you're always laying the track right as the train is leaving the station. It's true. But, I think there's something about the experience of being an entrepreneur that gives you a much greater even if you don't have it naturally, it gives you a much greater, respect for talent, for, like, human talent. And so, um, during that difficult period in 2008, I would I took a couple frankly terrifying trips to New York where I would have to be at a podium in front of 40 really angry bankers, okay? And uh, just had to explain to them, like, if we lose these people, they're going to go somewhere else. Like, they're not going to, you know, we won't have a company when we come back. And I said, like, I have the best boat in this space, okay, and I have the best crew in this space. But if there's no wind, we can't race, and we just have to wait a little while. We can figure out what we can throw overboard for a while, right? But we have to figure out how we're just gonna survive until the wind comes back. Um, but if we lose this talent, if we lose the crew, we're just done. Some of them kinda understood it, but frankly, that was a hard time for banks. That was a banking crisis. They all
Well,
had different
that's
issues.
also part of the problem with banks, and they don't understand that, and you articulated exactly what I've always believed. The plan is less important than the team you have, and when you have a team, they are full bore on to whatever it is that you're doing, the
Yeah.
vision of where you're going, with the energy and the love of the project, and then everything else gets worked out because you've accumulated a brilliant group of people.
Yeah. It is kind of a philosophy, though. I know I share it with you share it, right? That it's really all about the people, and it's very hard to even calculate what the cost of turnover is or what the value of retention is. Not to mention the fact that it's just much more pleasant to work in an environment with happy people who like each other and appreciate each other and support each other,
Yeah.
right? But my old friend Marcus Buckingham, the management consultant, he he used to work for the Gallup Corporation when he first came over from England, and he told me once that, the Gallup they do all these surveys, and they do one to this day that they've always done, and it's a survey of people who have not been fired but changed jobs, like quit their job and gotten a different job, and a list of reasons for why they did that. And when the first time he asked me, "What do you think the number one reason is?" I thought, uh, "More money? I mean, better opportunity?" He said, "The number one reason given every year without fail to this day is my boss didn't appreciate me." Which makes total sense if you think about it, right? You don't wanna spend most of your life at work and work hard on something and not be appreciated or feel active animus against you.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So we have some time at the end, and Adele and I want to hear about being a girl dad. And you're in a home with all these women. You've raised three fabulous daughters. What advice would you give?
Oh god. I'm no I'm you if you're expecting, like, font of wisdom here, I don't know.
I'm not expecting that.
I mean, I don't know. Well, first of all, mainly it was just a joy to be a girl dad. As you mentioned, I have 3 brothers, and I always grew up with, boys and brothers and teammates on sports and things like that. Um, I don't know if this is a true statement or not, but my observation is certainly that when they're younger, in particular, girls are they're a lot more fun because their emotional range is so much greater than boys at this age, right? And this is like no offense to those boys or the parents of them, but when the girls were like 13, 14, 15, 16, when they were Marlboro living at home, all their gaggle of girlfriends and stuff were always over at the house. like the boys are kind of loners, and they're sort of like monosyllabic. There's like bruh, dude, and they're playing their video games and they're in their sports teams. And you couldn't really sit down with a 15-year-old boy and like have an interesting conversation. But all these teenage girls would come over and we'd all have dinner together or watch American Idol together or whatever. And they're just going nonstop for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it was just so entertaining and so fun. And there was just so much more expressive, right? Their emotional range, for better or worse, cuts both ways, was much greater. And to this day, like they're still very close with boys they grew up with and went to different schools or whatever. And these boys are now in their 20s and they live in New York. Now they're interesting.
Yeah.
They are. They like have real jobs and they're well read and they're interesting. They were not really as teenagers,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but no, I loved raising the girls. I only have two requirements for them really. One is that they pursue things that they're really interested in, like genuinely passionate about, not something that they think I would approve of or that their peers think is important, but what they're actually interested in. And the second thing is that they work really hard. And then I figure you almost can't not be successful if you're doing something you really love and you're pursuing it really hard. And that's what they're all doing. I couldn't be prouder of them.
Well, you have every right to be, and having been in education a long time, there's so many families, and these girls or boys too feel that they have to go into something, or my parents will be upset if I don't go to med school or law school or whatever.
Yeah.
And so,
Still, you think today?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Less so maybe, but it's still there.
Yeah.
But I always loved that that was your philosophy, and they are doing fascinating.
And they're doing things that like I have no expertise in whatsoever. You know,
Can you talk about what they're doing?
Yeah, well, Phoebe, my oldest daughter, is a professional painter. She's an artist. She worked in New York as a painter, and then she worked as Marina Abramovich's studio assistant. The performance artist for 2 years, and she just started her MFA program at RISD in Providence, painting. So she's just going full bore for that, working really hard at it, but loving it. And then my twin girls, Phoebe's 26 and Tessa and Bella are 25. And Tessa works for Gensler, the architecture firm in New York, wants to be an architect. And Bella, her sister, works for UTA, works for in film and TV out here. So I still have one in LA.
That's right.
What
Yeah,
great, pursuits. So
Y-
great. That's
yeah, they're great.
really cool.
That
They're
is
great.
great. Well, Michael, this has been a wonderful hour with you, and we've enjoyed the conversation. I knew we would.
Yes. You were very sure and you were very right.
That's true.
Thanks for having me on. That was great. It was fun.
Thank you so much for listening to So Mom. Don't forget if you like what you hear or what you see, because now we're on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your pod. Thanks.
See you next time.